Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Geoff Levin Part 2. A couple weeks ago, I did a very extensive conversation with Geoff as a sort of experiment for my channel, sort of do a Joe Rogan-style talk. And we easily filled up 3 hours of talking about just a few years of history back in the day, with Geoff getting involved in Scientology in San Francisco back in the 60s. So Geoff was involved with a group called People, which of course got him involved with Celebrity Center back in its original days of starting back in the late 60s, early 70s. And he worked with Yvonne Gillum and a number, just a laundry list of musicians and celebrities that were around at that time. And we talked about some of that. So if you haven't seen any of that, you can catch that in part 1 of our conversation, which wrapped up with us talking about Geoff actually having been an on-again, off-again Sea Org member, because life was a little goofier for Sea Org and celebrities in the 70s than it is now, where it's much more strictly regimented now than it was then. And his trip to the ship where L. Ron Hubbard was, where he got a chance to work under L. Ron Hubbard directly as a musician, and saw that didn't really go so well and ended up leaving. I think it was, Geoff, would you say about 6 months you were on the ship?
Well, 3 months, 3 months on the music, and then 3 months on the RPF.
Right, doing the RPF.
And the RPF was really, really early RPF.
Yes.
Really early.
Yeah, exactly, like original form just about. And so again, a very different situation than how things are now. So we compared and contrasted a little bit about that. And when we left off, you had gotten off the ship. You said, okay, enough of this crap. And you left. And so we were sort of kind of following a little bit of a chronological sequence. We might continue to do that here in this half of the conversation. But I'm interested in hitting on some key points that we've talked about, which were closer to present time. So I think what I want to do first is just kind of ask you, okay, well, you got off the ship, you escaped the clutches of the RPF, you saw behind the curtain a bit, as far as, you really worked with the old man at that time. What were your impressions upon getting back into life in the real world, when getting back into music and, professional life? What happened and what were you thinking about as far as Scientology goes?
I think the first thing was a relief that I was officially out of the Sea Org, because I spent, and I don't know how much I covered because we were just going at such a rapid rate. I don't know exactly what I said about the time period from leaving People at the end of November '69, and my tenure as an on-again, off-again Sea Org member from '69 till I went to the ship. And
we talked about that.
Yeah, we did. So, but I never routed out. I think I mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that I had never routed out officially, because Yvonne, she ran by her own rules pretty much. So she would bend rules when she felt it was the right time to do it. Anyway, it was a relief to be home and to have an official program of paying off my freeloader debt, which I did. And I figured it out. Did I talk about that?
No, you didn't mention the freeloader's debt.
Okay, well, when I was offloaded, and that's what they called it. I was officially offloaded. I hit LA right away. I didn't go. I went to New York and then immediately went to LA. And I knew, okay, I got to pick up my life where I left off. I had no car. I think I had my amplifier and my guitar, and that was pretty much it. So I hit LA with no place to stay. I don't know, a few $100 in my pocket. And the first place I went was, what is it called? The CLO or the Sunset Building.
Okay.
Is it Hollywood or something? No, it's on Hollywood. The first Hollywood building that has that big vertical sign, because that was there.
Oh, what's the one that's called the test center now?
Yeah, the test center. At that time, that housed a lot of staff and people who handled various kind of departments like Sea Org. So I
Oh,
hit LA, and I think within the first day I was there.
okay.
I went in, things were a lot different then. The people were actually pretty nice because they wanted you to pay off your debt. That was their stat, was paying off the freeloader debt. And my debt was pretty hefty, and I'd always been afraid of that debt. That was kind of why I didn't push to get officially off, officially like out of the Sea Org, because I knew I was going to end up owing money.
Of course.
And that's something that I think if you talk to any other XSO, I think it is a consideration that, I'm going to come out, and especially if you don't want to leave Scientology.
Oh, well, exactly. And for anybody who's watching this who doesn't know what the hell we're talking about, when you leave Scientology staff or the Sea Org without fulfilling your contract, and you sign up for a time period, you sign up for 2.5 years or for 5 years, but the Sea Org, it's a billion-year contract, the rest of your life. I mean,
I didn't quite fulfill it.
If you leave before you die, and if that happens, then you owe money back to the church for any services rendered, which you got for free because you were a staff member or a Sea Org member. So that is what Hubbard called those people. If you leave and you break your contract, you're a freeloader. And of course,
he gave it a perfect name. Even though I probably, if I'd been paid for what I did, because some of what I did was music and stuff like that, my debt was around 11,000.
And that's hefty for the 1970s.
Well, I looked at what the conversion is about 60 to 65,000 now.
Yep. And during the 70s and 80s and 90s, even into the early 2000s, that was not uncommon. It was only after people started making a really big stink about this, and it started coming out all over the internet, and people were literally posting copies of the invoices of their freeloaders bills, and it was $100,000, $150,000, and the public were like, "What is this? You give up 10, 20, 30 years of your life, you leave this group, and they slap you with this?" Nobody can understand it.
No, well, it's the view is that it's a privilege to work for this purpose. It's a privilege. So my view of it was pretty much, I think I mentioned, my experience with Hubbard was not negative. And even though if you read like Janice Gillen, she didn't quite have the easy experience that I did.
No.
But,
and I got to tell you, I mean, at the time, you must have really been pretty deep in the belief, because to get away from the ship where you were RPF'd.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it was a kinder, gentler RPF then than it is now, but still.
Well, kinder and gentler is relative, when the fact is that they birthed the women in one tiny little room, like 8 or 9 women in one room that's about double, like 5 feet. They put bunks, and when the bunks were this high, and we were sleeping, I was lucky enough to sleep in a bunk, but I had maybe double, like 2 feet of space, not even 2 feet, to get into my bunk. And the guys that weren't so lucky slept in the hold.
Right.
But everybody took it.
I can only wonder what, that's why I asked, like, what was the mindset when you left that? Because I think, people who would hear that story and they would think, what the hell, dude? Why didn't you just run as far away as you could from all of this? That is madness.
Because I didn't have any, it's weird. It seemed normal. I mean, for me, I grew up in lower middle class. we had I had decent parents. I wasn't abused. I didn't have a lot, and everything was kind of budgetary. I saw what was going on the ship, and it made sense, because when you're in that environment, you're looking at, well, we have to support the old man. We have to support Hubbard. He's got this purpose is worldwide. And if you're on the ship, you're seeing statistics. Every staff member was affected by what happened globally. Because your bonuses, we would get bonuses because at that particular time when I was there, the churches were doing pretty well, and they were sending in pretty hefty, dollars to the ship. So Hubbard was kind of happy. That was good for him. He saw things, and I know that's when he wrote the song where he asked me to write the song, "We're Going Up While the World Goes Down."
Right.
And he was feeling it. He was feeling like, oh, things are working pretty well.
Okay.
At the same time, I had mentioned the ship was overcrowded, and they weren't about to get a new ship. And so you threw the RPF wherever you threw them. They just went wherever you could put them. And so I just took it all in as, okay, we need this harsh discipline. These guys screwed up. And they didn't just screw up in an org, they screwed up right underneath Hubbard. Oh, that reminds me of another story. And I don't know how many people have talked about Hubbard's sensitivity.
Pray tell, what do you refer?
I went on the ship, and the first thing that on the RPF, it was really critical. But I found out he was super sensitive to any smell.
Yes, he was.
We all know that because he wrote a policy that kind of alluded to no perfume. And, well, it was way beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
He would inspect. We had to buy a certain kind of soap for the decks. It was saltwater soap to clean the decks, and the decks were teak. They were having a hell of a time finding a soap that he didn't smell.
Okay.
Now, understand that this is non-smelling soap anyway. It's not meant to. It's meant to clean a ship. And plus use these huge hoses. You had these hoses you had to hold like this. So you'd scrub the deck with these big scrub brushes. Then you'd hose it down heavily. And he'd still come out and he could smell it.
Yeah, I was actually told a story by another Sea Org member who might have been around when you were there, but certainly was on the ship with Hubbard, and at some point in time. And he actually told me the story when we were on the RPF, and he told this whole story about how Hubbard's study in his room, was wherever it was between decks there, and that Hubbard wanted his room to or the maybe it's the research room. Anyways, one of the rooms that Hubbard
he had a research room
frequented, and it had to be cleaned, and there couldn't be any smell afterwards, right, of any kind. Right. And so they went in there and they scrubbed and they scrubbed and they scrubbed, and hours go by, and he comes in and he's like, nope, this room stinks, and they cleaned it again. They ended up cleaning this room, if I remember the story right. They ended up cleaning this room top to bottom, from beginning to end, like 4 different times, and rinsing it down 4 separate times after that in order to try to get any possible atom of soap, out of this room. And Hubbard was notorious for this. In his later years of his life, he had his shirts being rinsed. Maybe while he's on the ship too, by his messengers.
Oh, on the ship for sure. No, that was definitely...
his shirts would get soaped and washed, and then rinsed 7 times before he would deign to wear them. Because
that makes sense. And he had silk shirts.
Yeah,
he had a lot of silk shirts and silk scarves that he wore.
Yeah.
There's another story.
It wasn't, I don't know that it was a germaphobe thing. It was just this smell thing he had. He just was like,
It was more the smell thing.
yeah.
And I do remember one story because I was on the deck, and I think it was on the RPF then. And we were in one of the bays, like in Portugal, or it could have been the Canary Islands. Anyway, it's a pretty big bay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so you could see across the bay to the other tip of where the island was. You could barely see it. It was like probably about a half mile and a mile away, maybe further. There was a fire going on, kind of a brush fire. It wasn't huge, but a brush fire. You could see some smoke. He ordered one of the deck guys, get in a little boat, row over there and put the fire out, because it was bothering him really severely. Now, you couldn't see any smoke where we were. The smoke was all centered around that little section, but that was a mile and a half away or something. Well, he sent the guy off to put the fire out because it was bothering him really severely. There's one other thing that I can't remember who got busted, but somebody got busted for leaving a can of turpentine outside, but near his study vent. And those vents are kind of these big tubes. They look like tubas.
Yeah.
You know, they have somebody allegedly left a can of turpentine that was open, probably a little can that they used to clean their brush. And he got deathly ill from it.
Wow.
And so that guy got busted big time.
Yeah, he couldn't be putting any interbulation on Hubbard's lines, and that would have been definitely counted as interbulation.
Well, whether that's why he got ill, I can't say. I'm just telling you that they were looking around for why did he get ill?
Right.
And that's what came up.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to imply by that I think that's why Hubbard got sick. I'm just saying that was interbulation. Yeah, that's the Scientology word for, you do something wrong or bad and you piss somebody off, you've interbulated them.
Yeah. So
and Hubbard would have been the kind of person who absolutely would have blamed somebody for
well, if he heard that, he would have hit, I think he did. Well, he hit the roof.
Yeah, of course he did.
So
now, again, though, I don't know. I don't mean to come across challenging. Okay, I'm just trying to understand.
Right. You can
where your head was at, coming off of that boat. I mean, having, like I said, literally, you went to the very top of the organization. You were down.
Yeah, that was the very top.
Yeah, I mean, celebrity, and then, and you certainly had celebrity experience, and so you had a certain degree of status. But
yes.
But then you meet the founder, the source, the old man, and you're working for him. And this goes on for not just a couple of days or a few weeks. I mean, you're there for months.
Right.
And then you leave, and, would you say that your experience of being on the ship was a net positive or a net negative?
Net positive.
Really?
Well, I got to work with him. I survived it to some degree. I was told that it was up to me what I did, and he wrote in the orders of the day, and I have the copy of it. I can send it to you if you want. I'm pretty sure I can find it, where he listed the people who were offloaded, who had been asked if they wanted to leave and said yes, and they were being offloaded, and he was not too pleased, and he said in so many words, they're really blowing it. It was like they're really screwed up and missed an amazing opportunity.
And so that experience for you with Hubbard sort of basically kind of, not insulting you directly, but certainly saying you missed the boat.
He was definitely, demeaning us.
Yeah. And that was a net positive experience for you?
It was, because I was getting off the boat.
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, that was the good part. But I mean, what about the 6 months of bullshit? I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to understand. Why would you stick with it after that?
I got a perspective on him. Like I said, at the time, he impressed me because I got this. And at that time, it appeared, based on what I knew as a Scientologist, that he was practicing what he preached. That's
Ah,
what it appeared. And that was 6 months out of whatever his whole history.
sure.
That 6 months, he applied conditions directly to me, and
Okay.
they made sense at the time. And I felt it was a privilege to work with him. And I got a perspective on him, which was valuable to me. And the perspective was he's brilliant. He's not superhuman. He's very much affected by his own upbringing, based on what I saw he liked musically and
Hmm.
what he wrote, that he was very much not necessarily with it, but I felt that philosophically he was.
Hmm.
It's
Okay.
spiritually and philosophically he was. And he was pretty magnanimous at that particular time because money was coming in.
Right. So maybe the window of time you were there had enough positives in it that it gave you this overall positive impression. And at least you thought he was walking the walk as well as talking the talk.
Exactly. That's what I thought.
Okay.
And that, now, of course, I thought there were several complete assholes that had high positions. But those were them. And then that's the way the church itself talks about it is, oh, that guy, that was him. That wasn't Hubbard.
Right.
That was, and it's always the lower executive who misapplied Scientology.
Right.
And at the time, I was believing that. I
Sure.
mean,
Of course.
that's how, when you're drinking the Kool-Aid, you may really have animosity towards somebody who really mishandled you. But that was him, not Hubbard.
Right. Okay. I get it.
Does that make
So,
sense?
okay. I think I get the idea now. All right. Well, okay. Thanks for that. So, okay. So you go back home and you go to get your freeloaders dead and that sort of thing happens.
Yeah,
Um,
right away.
yeah.
In
Right
fact,
away you got this big debt.
I paid money that day. So I hit LA and I give him my first payment.
Did you end up paying the whole thing?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my God. Okay.
In fact, I looked at it as a challenge, and I wanted to be back contributing to Celebrity Center and Scientology, and Yvonne was there. And at the time, I got my job back as the guitarist for Jimmy Spheris.
Oh, okay.
And Jimmy Spheris was, I think, I'm trying to think which album we were doing. I did 4 of his albums, and he only did 5. So I was on 4 of his albums. And the guy who replaced me, they didn't like him. So
All
when I
right.
came back,
And you got right back in there.
Jimmy was like, he was pissed that I left, but he was sure happy when I came back.
Okay.
So
All
I
right.
got
So,
that job. And so now I think we're almost ready to record a new album. And I think it was the one at A&M. We recorded it at A&M,
all right.
which was a big deal, by the way. A&M was on Sunset Boulevard. That's Alpert, Herb Alpert formed that label, A&M Records. A&M, I think, had Joni Mitchell, and they had some great artists.
And this was 1975?
4. It was
4.
the end of 74, because I left the ship when did I leave it? About September. Oh, I'm not sure, but it was in the fall or summer fall of 74.
Okay.
And I came back, and so now I had a job again. I think I borrowed money from my parents to buy a car. They were happy I was back. They never understood any of this, really. They just didn't understand it.
Right.
And and then I was living in a little room off of Hoover Street. Hoover Street was kind of famous, which was near Alvarado Street, which was near where Celebrity Center was, and the LA org was, the Church of Scientology Los Angeles, and then the Advanced Org of Los Angeles, where you did your upper levels.
Right.
So
those were different. Those were in different locations to where they're at now, because Hubbard purchased the Cedars-Sinai complex.
No. And at the time, Hubbard was pretty paranoid, and the GO, which is now Office of Special Affairs, but it was called the Guardian's Office. The word really was, got to keep it low key. We don't want to be making any waves. We don't want to be seen as like a big church right now. We want to just grow quietly without a lot of attention on us. So we don't want these big buildings. At the time, he was growing at the rate he could afford to grow, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And it would actually be a more sensible approach to growth.
It was a sensible approach. And that was as long as he was running things that I saw, that's the way they were being run.
Right.
You don't build something, then grow into it. You grow into something to where you have to build it because you're busting at the seams.
That's exactly right. And that is actually one of the biggest reasons why so many Scientologists who came up when we did saw what Miscavige was doing with this Ideal Org program, where they're, if you build it, they will come sort of philosophy. And you buy these great big buildings at great expense and renovate them at even more expense. Hubbard never, ever, ever, ever.
He would have never allowed
that program.
No, he would never have endorsed it. And honestly, with the Ideal Orgs, all you really have in there is probably a bunch of dead baseball players. The ghosts of dead baseball players. If you build it, they will come.
That's right.
Field of Dreams.
Yes, exactly.
And that's pretty much what you have. The hallways are just filled with ghosts.
That's right.
You don't, but they, maybe a lot of them, we don't know because I'm not there, but anyway.
No. But it was definitely counter to Hubbard's policies to operate the way they're operating now, which is not to say that Hubbard was a brilliant policy writer. It's just that he had a different philosophy about buying buildings than David Miscavige does.
Well, yeah, and he knew what he could afford, and he wanted things to be, like I said, just almost, they had to put people in the hallways in order to service everyone.
That's right.
And there was a certain time when that happened, by the way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There was time. They were auditing, at St. Hill in the 60s, they were auditing on the tennis courts and in the student houses and anywhere they could find space. And it was like this at LA Org also, I know.
Well, and when they got Celebrity Center, as big as Celebrity Center is, I would say, I'm trying to think probably the late 80s, 90s. That place was so packed. And that was the heyday of Scientology.
Yeah.
At that time. And it was really, I think, we're kind of diverging from what we're talking about, but in 93, when the tax exemption came in, for the next 5 years, there was a tremendous amount of money coming in to Scientology.
Yes.
And it was not just the greed of what Miscavige was doing. I didn't even see that. I only saw, all of us just saw, oh my God, we don't have to, under the table, try to get our donations to be accepted as tax deductible.
Right.
So that was probably the most effective thing that Miscavige did for his program.
Inarguably, I agree completely.
And getting the tax exemption, he got every person believed in him at that point.
That's right. He was the hero of the day, no question.
He was a superhero. I mean, in the real sense of a superhero, going up against the IRS, which at that time is kind of like, it'd be like going up against the whole of Germany when they were the Nazis.
Sure.
At
least that's how we perceived it.
Well, that's how we perceived it.
Right.
And so really that was a boom time, but
Yes.
it didn't last that long. And then as the IAS got bolder and the games got more absurd, and the war chest really didn't need to be there anymore.
Right.
We won.
That's right. And just to back up a little bit for people who don't know, the International Association of Scientologists is a membership status organization with levels of membership. Originally, it was just it was binary. You're a member or you're not a member. And then then they introduced status levels as a new way of getting even more money out of existing members. And this all started in 1984. Mm-hmm. And my position is that L. Ron Hubbard never knew about it.
No, I don't think
there's no evidence that he did. And it was a brainchild of Miscavige, according to people who were inside and working with him at that time. Mm-hmm. And L. Ron Hubbard was absolutely not down with membership levels and all this. They had an older membership back in the day, and that had never really been pumped or pushed or
no, it was just you're a member.
Yeah, and status levels was certainly never a thing. And Hubbard was always about getting money through services and through books. Miscavige, faced with gigantic legal troubles and money need for lawyers, high-powered lawyers, not just the local Scientology boys anymore, had to figure out how to make some money, and he had to figure out how to make it fast because all the money, the big money had been being shuffled to Hubbard's accounts. And so in 1984, he's facing, okay, we gotta solve this tax exemption problem. And so, amongst other things, and so the IAS was formed, and they started pumping for memberships. And then, like I said, before too long, they had levels of membership: patron gold status, patron silver status.
That was pretty quick.
Patron meritorious, patron gloritorious, blah blah blah. And now they're up to statuses of up to $250,000, $500,000, $1 million. I mean, they're huge.
Or 10 million.
Yeah, exactly. And they come up with trophies bigger than I am, and they give these things out. But at the time, the reason I'm talking about all this is because you mentioned the war chest. The single driving force that was getting members into the IAS and getting donations was this talk about the war chest. We had to fill the war chest because we were being faced, Scientology was being faced, that we were being told, by psychiatric opposition and by the IRS. And we had to...
And in Germany?
Yes.
Germany
in Germany, that's
Germany
right.
was really... These were like scaring and it was a fear tactic, scaring the shit out of everybody. And we were like, and then it became like patriotism. You're doing this because our country is being attacked. Is really just like this. And it is like our country. When you're a Scientologist, you view it as our theta country. This is like our universe, and we're in the right universe. And everyone else is literally pre getting into the universe. They're like, someday they hopefully will be in, or we'll pick them up next lifetime. So it's such a huge game that is presented to you. And if you can donate like 10 grand, because when in the beginning, the original membership was 2 grand. No, there was a $400 membership.
That was the annual membership.
Annual number, $400 annually, 2 grand. For me, I was just like, well, that's bullshit. I'm not doing the annual. I'll just get 2 grand and I'll do it. And I did it right away, one of the first people. And I was one of the first people to become, that I remember, a patron who was actually a musician. And that's when patrons were 40 grand, but that was much earlier on.
Wow.
And so now, because I was an XSO, this takes us back to me coming back to LA.
Yep.
When I came back to LA, now I was in a different status. I was XSO.
Yep.
if you're XSO, there are certain things that no matter who you are a second-class citizen. I don't care how much you donate. I don't care. You have to be a massive celebrity. I mean, massive, not at my level. I was a semi-celebrity. But I was in music, and music were second-class citizens compared to the actors. The actors and Celebrity Center eventually just became Celebrity Actor Center. That's where the big bucks are. That's where the big names are. And music, they just kind of the poor sister.
Right.
So anyway, I come back. I'm working with a celebrity. I'm recording at A&M on Epic Records. We're touring, opening for bands like Kansas and Richie Havens and stuff like that. I have to, but I'm ex-Sea Org, so they can't really talk about me because I'm ex-Sea Org.
Oh, they can't promote what you're doing, you mean?
Not really me, because
right.
Not very visibly, I was told that I would never get the cover of the Celebrity magazine, ever.
Right.
Because I'm XSO.
Yep.
In fact, they wouldn't even show pictures of me.
And this was in the mid-'70s under Yvonne.
Well, it was under Yvonne. It wasn't as bad, quite as bad under Yvonne. It wasn't as bad.
But still, you were still being ostracized to some degree.
To some degree.
Even under her.
But it got really bad, and we're kind of progressing forward. And I want to kind of stay on the timeline.
Yeah.
It got bad it really got bad in the 80s.
Okay. All right.
And there's a policy where Hubbard, he actually names of people who left the Sea Org, and they were high up auditors, and I won't name the people, but they audited me at a mission early on. And they were really good people. Unfortunately, I think they're still in. So
all right.
Class 8 auditors or Class 6 interned auditors, grade auditors. They'd audited me in the mission, then they went into the Sea Org, then they left the Sea Org. And this policy was written, you can look it up, where he says anybody who leaves the Sea Org is a DB.
Right, and what is a DB?
From degraded being.
And what does that mean in Scientology?
It means it's somebody who, geez, we can look it up in the dictionary because.
Oh no, I want to know what was your understanding of it.
My understanding was the dictionary understanding that this was a person who would take a tremendous amount of work to rehabilitate to where they could actually complete a cycle of action, where they could not be a drain on an organization or on other people. DVs are people who they leech off of other people.
Did you think of yourself that way when Hubbard put that out in writing?
I always felt that was he was specifically talking about them, but then that became the policy.
Right.
So the way everybody was perceived who had left, even people, I know one person, and I won't name names, unfortunately she died a while ago. This is a person who bent over backwards to donate money. We're talking during the IAS's heyday in the 90s. Oh my God, she was a wonderful social person. She brought together a lot of people. They gave her a lot of shit. She was an original staff member in the 70s, I think maybe even early 60s. She left, formed a really successful company. I mean, super successful. They were making millions. She was never accepted, and I think to her dying day, she felt that they would never, ever give her a break on it, that she was I got to tell you the way that all of us felt, I think, and I think I could speak for any SL member who then had to come out and then pay their debt off and then be a Scientologist in good standing. We were not Scientologists in good standing. We were acceptable Scientologists who could be given service, they could do all the services, but they were not treated as first-class citizens. They were treated as second-class citizens and could never be fully acknowledged for any of their achievements. I know somebody else who's a power FSM, still in Scientology, dynamo person. She was a pretty high executive at Celebrity Center. Actually, a wonderful person, except that's kind of an oxymoron in itself to say that about a Scientologist. Because, as my girlfriend says, how wonderful can they be if they're telling you that they're going to disconnect from you, or that your kids have to disconnect from you, or whatever.
Right.
Anyway, I'm diverging. So this
well, only
gal,
slightly, and I just want to say that this is one of the things about Scientology that has never changed, because the experience you had as a second-class citizen was the exact same experience I had in 2012, 13 as a second-class citizen.
Right, I've read your story too.
Yeah, and that's what got. I mean, this has been consistent all throughout this second class. You betrayed us. So therefore, we're never going to give you the honor and prestige of somebody who might actually be doing less than you are, but you're stained and you have a permanent mark on your record because you were part of us and then you dared to leave and go an independent life.
Absolutely. My view was I actually did more for Scientology in the 60s, 70s, than almost anybody I know, because of all of the performances I did and that got people moving, got them excited, got new people in. And a guy could come in who was a young actor who had some credits and enough money, and he was considered a big deal.
Right.
And he was in for like 3 weeks.
Right.
And they'd put him right on the, right in the front of Celebrity Magazine or in their live wire. And yet I was on Billboard and they would not put my picture. I mean, I was charting with my group Celestial Navigations in the 80s. They wouldn't put, they mentioned us.
Right.
So.
Fair enough. Yeah, so let's, okay, well, let's go ahead and get back then to that time you came out of the Sea Org, free orders debt.
So I came back.
Working again.
Yeah, I'm working again. And I mean, there's a lot of different stories. My personal story, I won't get into it too much. But things are going pretty well. And I paid off the debt in less than a year and a half.
Okay.
All I did, I was living in one little room in a house. And didn't really have extra money, but I was paying every week. My thing was every week I'm going to pay.
What did you want to get back to? What was your goal at this point in time now? We talked about how you got in, and it was through the spiritual stuff and the OT stuff and the superpower stuff. Was that still front and center in your mind as far as what you expected to achieve by paying off this debt and getting back on services?
At the time, I had done OT3. I had done the other OT levels.
Right.
I think for me, this was like 74, 75. I think there was some auditing I could get, and I wanted to train.
Right, because OT3 at that point was about as high as it went, right?
As high. At the time, OT3 was OT2, OT3. No, OT3 was the last negative gain.
Yeah, that was
when we say negative gain, I think that's a term that doesn't make any sense unless you explain what negative gain is. Where you're removing the, you could say, the painful incidents and engrams, and now you're removing the painful incidents and engrams that keep these other beings connected to your body.
Right.
They're all connected to your body, and so
the body things.
The body things, but we're supposed to have gotten rid of them by OT3.
Right.
And then this is 1974. And so that was as far as it went.
So yeah, because there was no new era Dianetics for OTs,
No,
or
there
the OT
wasn't.
drug rundown, and the OT
No, no.
now OT 4 and 5 and 6 and 7.
So positive gain, and here's, I think, where a lot of people fell down and where a lot of people got disenchanted,
Mm-hmm.
I think was from OT4, OT5, OT6, OT7, and 8, which all were released. These were all exercises to exercise you as a spiritual being who could be outside their body.
Now you're talking about OT 4, 5, 6, and 7 and 8 at that time.
At that time.
Yes, because they're totally different now.
Oh, it's completely different now. And
right.
And any thought of spiritual ability or these, what I call out of body abilities as a spirit or a spiritual being, I mean, that's gone now.
Right.
I mean, they talk about it, but it's a joke. They don't. They don't deliver it, and actually they talk very little about it in
That's
the
right.
present.
That's
they
right.
don't. At one time, you were cause over life. I mean, I'm talking about much later.
Yeah.
But that was the idea, even in the 70s, in the earlier 70s, that you were capable.
I think that the fact that they don't talk about it anymore has a lot to do with so much of what I've talked about on this channel with others about how Miscavige is just not a true believer, and he doesn't push that stuff because he doesn't believe it. You know, at least that's my take on it. I could be wrong. I'm prepared to be wrong about that, but I don't think I think if Miscavige truly believed in this stuff and he really, really thought that Scientology was all about making more powerful people through spiritual ability, and that was the goal, and that we were going to have a better planet as a result,
Mm-hmm.
he'd be doing very, very different things from his.
Well, I think that if I kind of view this the way Chris Shelton views it, in a very analytical way, having been and observed this stuff, for most of my life.
Yeah.
He demonstrated that pretty early on of what was important to him. And I tend to agree with you from a very observable point of view. He never really allowed anyone to audit him.
Right.
That's the bottom line. There's no reports that, oh yeah, I was David's auditor, because it didn't happen.
Right.
So I think that David Miscavige does have a very strong belief in one spirit, and that's him, one powerful spiritual being who really, he may believe it. I don't think he believes it. If he believed it, he would have to follow LRH's view that we're all, have multi-billions of body thetans on us, and we got to work hard to get rid of them.
That's right. And what I've heard, and this is all just rumor.
Yeah.
I've heard that he is scared to death of kids because he doesn't want their body thetans jumping on him. So he's got some belief, maybe. That could just be a joke taken out of context. It
might be. I mean, he's scared of death of certain things. What they are, I think, is different than what people think they are.
Right.
That's my feeling.
I think you're right.
But I think the demonstration, it's like you look at what they do, not what they say. And what he did as an example, any Scientologists currently, if they had any vestige of critical thinking, would just go, well, when did David Miscavige get his auditing? When did he achieve OT8? Right. When did he finish OT7? Well, there was no start. So right there, to me, it's a clear answer that he doesn't believe in it, or he believes that he somehow was able to circumvent it for whatever reason. And so it's only for lesser beings.
Exactly. You know, actually, the omission of this is actually interesting. I never really thought about it from this angle before, but you know, if there would be a picture anywhere in Scientology that would be uh, that would show David Miscavige as a true believer more than anything else, and would show his pride in doing Scientology and being at the top of the bridge and being a Scientologist, it would be a picture of David Miscavige holding up his OT8 certificate.
Exactly.
And there is no such picture. In fact, I'm told the last time he went in session by somebody who used to work in RTC was 1994.
Yeah, that's probably correct.
You know, so somebody asked me on my Q&A show I think I answered this last week, where's he at on the bridge? What's his auditing levels? The OT8? What's the evidence that he's OT8? And I said, you know what? I don't know, because there's zero evidence of David Miscavige's bridge progress to Scientologists. Everybody just assumes he's at the top of the bridge and they don't ask too many questions.
Well, I think you can cut this out if it's too esoteric.
Oh, now I have to keep it. Yeah.
No, because I got to see how good I am at explaining something to the public that has not been immersed in all this.
Yeah. What do you got?
But if you go on the premise that we are an individual being ourselves, alone, but then we are covered with these other individual beings who were through lots of painful, like hypnosis and what are they brainwashing, through millions of years of brainwashing, to where they've shut down and become subservient to a point where they can only be packaged together and then stuck to our bodies. And that brings up a completely different theory that maybe I'll talk to you about separately, because it never got answered for me. But let's assume that one of those beings was like that, and then all the people who audited them and released them, correct? They get released off of our body.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe because even in the early days, this was supposed to be happening when they were running Dianetics. That actually, when you ran a painful experience, sometimes there were other beings connected into that painful experience that were stuck to your body. And so you'd run the painful experience, the engram, and not only would it be relief for you, but these other beings would blow off of it.
That's right. Because a very minutia esoteric part of this whole OT body thetan thing is, and it's clearly explained in one of Hubbard's bulletins, I think in a couple places, but certainly in one of them, is that it is the fact of having it all experienced the same traumatic incident that causes them to become body
clustered. Yeah, or become clustered together.
So if you happen to find that traumatic episode, even if you're not OT,
right? No,
even if you're not up at that level, you don't even know about body thetans yet. But that doesn't mean, according to Scientology theory, you still got them. And if you find that traumatic episode that caused this clustering of these particular little group of body thetans, because you've got millions of these things on your body.
Yeah, millions.
So here's this particular incident that happened to you, 7 trillion years ago. Not the Xenu thing. It's a different thing.
Yeah, different.
And you happen to run that out with Dianetics, which of course you would tend to do with Dianetics.
You could.
You could pop those body thetans and not even know it happened.
Yes, and that's in several policies of his, or HCOBs of his.
Yes.
Hubbard Communications Office bulletins.
Yes.
That are the technical or tech stuff.
That's right.
Well, here's my theory. What if one of those body thetans on some Scientologists way back, in the 60s or 60s. When was Miscavige born?
1960.
Okay, so that's 10 years we had of Dianetics.
Yep.
What if one of those guys ran something and it blew off this random thetan who he didn't have, it was just him. He didn't have body things. And that was Miscavige. So he got the benefit of Dianetics, and he never had to do anything because he found out that he was just a single, there was nothing connected to him. So now this is, technically, he could think that.
He actually could think that. And he would be one of maybe other Scientologists who also think that, because
that's possible.
because the whole theory of these OT levels is that you are releasing and freeing these body thetans, and as newly freed, rehabilitated beings, they will go get their own body here on Earth or somewhere else, and they will, if they're here on Earth, they'll certainly connect up with Scientology.
Yeah, and they'll be better. But
That's
then
right.
there's the Escher picture, that painting of Escher paintings.
Yes.
That technically Hubbard never wrote that. And he never explained, well, what about these guys? If I had this and we've been living for trillions of years, well, what about those guys who got packaged? At some point, they must have been packaged. They must have had their own body thetans too. And then it goes on ad infinitum that, okay, what about the guy down? It's like a pyramid scheme. You get to a certain point.
Yeah.
What about that there's no end to it? So it's
that could be that's the Russian doll theory of
that's the Russian doll. But you get down to the tiniest doll, but then there's like 10,000 dolls below that doll.
Exactly. You could definitely send yourself into a spin thinking about this crap.
Well, I did.
Of course you did.
And I never got an answer on it because they couldn't answer me.
Well, also, I think that you came from a time when people actually thought more about Scientology and what Hubbard was saying.
Oh, yeah.
Because when I came up in it, I mean, by the time I was coming around, I was told very directly, I mean, to my face in a very, very emphatic manner by a course supervisor in the 1980s, before I'd even joined staff. This is the tech. You don't question it. You read what it says, you understand it, and you move on. Because I had some question that just was not resolving, and we were doing word clearing, and we were doing this, we were doing that. And I was like, dude, it is not a misunderstood word. This fucking sentence just doesn't make any goddamn sense. And he was just not having any of it. And he finally got in my face about it, and he made it very clear that it was not something wrong with the materials. It was something wrong with me, and I better get that, and I better get it right now, or I was going to be in some trouble. And I was a fairly, impressionable 15, 16-year-old who was not into being yelled at. And I was on a course. This was the first or second course I ever did in Scientology for real. And so I got that indoctrination very early on. And that was at the public level. That wasn't a Sea Org member telling me.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I didn't get that. We were, and there was still somewhat of a freedom to have discussions.
Exactly. And we lost that. We lost, I think the 80s was.
It became, that thought police kicked in pretty much in the 80s.
Yep. And that was a direct result of Miscavige.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It was like they needed to figure out, what are we going to do? This Hubbard is on his way out. But we can't change this stuff. How can we change the emphasis of this stuff?
Exactly.
And that's
actually, again, this is really sparking some thoughts for me, because Miscavige had a real problem there, which was when Hubbard was alive, at least you could have the semblance of asking him for a clarification about something.
Oh, absolutely.
And after he died, that was it, man. You don't have that anymore. This is the tech. This is all we got. So you better figure it out, because there isn't anybody to ask.
Well, and then being what I call a calculating psychotic, which means they can think in a certain way.
Yes.
And you can actually come up with solutions. You have a thought process, but it's always skewed by the purpose underneath it. and the intention underneath it. That's why you're psychotic, as
Yes.
opposed to an intelligent, good person. And he was able to pretty cleverly figure out, okay, let's do the research. Somehow there's so much of it that never got out because it wasn't important. We can make it important because it is his. We can use that to not only make money because of all the lectures that got released and the books that got redone, but we can and Hubbard was very good about this because he got stuff from the best in terms of if you change the order of importance of something, it can change the whole dynamic of it. It can change the whole way it operates.
That's right.
And you make the wrong thing important and you can throw it completely off, even though it's part of it. And that's what Miscavige has done very carefully and capitalized on, really capitalized on what you said. In a way, the fact that it's getting attacked so much is a verification of how important it is for people to donate to it.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's right. And that reasoning goes back to Hubbard as well.
Well, it does. Hubbard just had a different solution for it, and he had confidence in himself that he could run the organization. And whether he developed the upper levels, which the Ned for OTs, where you start auditing this whole new level of removing the body thetans, that gave him a whole new level of income.
Right.
And I'd have to say fantastic income in comparison to what he was making before. Is like all of a sudden everybody was like, yeah, we got to do this. And he put the fear of God into everybody and going, this shit will kill you if you don't get rid of it.
That's right.
That's
right.
And the joke is that shit does kill you if you stay in Scientology.
Exactly.
As you can see by the people who are in and how many people are dying of cancer and dying of other illnesses because they have this level of stress that's going on that's 24/7. I figured it out for myself, having been through that level of stress and had a complete breakdown for 3 years. And I started to get a different perspective on it. And I realized that 24/7 stress, finally, I couldn't deal with it. And the only way I saw to deal with it was to shut down, completely shut down. And when I came out of it, I went, wow, no wonder these guys it's the reversal of health. Mm-hmm. And when you have your endocrine system and adrenaline running 24/7, it's going to kill you. It throws your whole body off. And you can see how Scientologists age now. They age differently than other people, in my opinion, when I look at them.
I don't disagree with you on that because, of course, my own experience parallels it entirely. It took me years to learn how to relax after I left the Sea Org. Literally years. So I get it.
But it's not SO. It's not just staff. It's permeated 100% to all members.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply otherwise.
Yeah, all members are.
I would say that I think the Sea Org experience is a harsher version of that than.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I was, not an exaggeration. There's no hype to this statement when I say I was 24/7.
Yes.
That's not a figure of speech. That is literally what my life was for years.
Well, in the Sea Org,
that tends to be the Sea Org experience.
It's well documented in the Sea Org.
Of course.
What I feel is not really understood by ex-members and certainly not members is the fact that once you make that commitment, and it's a commitment that goes down to your core, because the selfishness involved is about me achieving the freedom as a spiritual being, which I can only do through Scientology. That's the only way I can do it.
Yeah.
And I know that in my core. That's where I was.
Yep.
And so there's this nervousness that you're going to somehow lose that.
Yes.
And so that's a constant issue of, and then when you're being fed that that's the rest of the world and we're going to save it, but look what we have to deal with now. I mean, we've got all these people who are telling lies about us, but it's 24/7 now. It used to be an occasional book here, and then on the internet, okay, it was the clam bake or whatever, that, which was really big, and then it became a few people. Then it's the trickle. It's like coming off of an iceberg. The trickle started to become a creek, and then the creek turned into a river. Now we're talking about the Mississippi in terms, and that's what a member is looking at, in my opinion, that they're threatened with losing their eternity. And so that's a 24, you wake up, and now with people like you, with people like, it's permeating and becoming, what's the word for it? You can't get away from it.
Yeah, it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere.
Ubiquitous. Yeah, that's the word. Yeah. It's ubiquitous. And there's nothing, I don't see a let up. I mean, I was so encouraged that they got nominated for an Emmy again.
Yeah, second season. We had Scientology in the aftermath.
Yeah, and I got, last year I was considered for it. I mean, I think I can talk about that.
Oh, sure. Of course you can.
Because at the time I was having trouble with my son, who was starting to disconnect from me.
Okay.
But it was not resolved or anything. So, and then it wasn't the right time. My story was not complete. And I wasn't officially, almost nobody knew that I had done this very small interview with my brother. And so nobody even saw it hardly. And so I was still considered in good standing to some degree. When I put the band together and I told my kids, then the shit hit the fan.
Right. Okay.
But that's all right.
Well, I definitely agree with everything you said there about the Scientology mindset at all levels, and how concerning and worrisome and stressful that can be for Scientologists, because they're faced with that dichotomy of saving the world, everything. This is the most important thing ever, but it's all over everywhere. That is the most toxic thing you could possibly be involved in, and get away from it.
Right. And what I see is friends of mine and people that I know, arthritis, diabetes, heart problems, cancer.
Let me ask you a question, because I addressed something like this in a Q&A recently, and I had an answer for it, but I'm curious what you're going to say. Do you think that that's affected also, not only by the stress that they have to experience, because we're sort of talking about, some psychosomatic origination of some of this, and I'm down with it, right? I get it. Do you think that Scientologists, more so than other people, short of Jehovah's Witnesses who won't, take blood transfusions and stuff,
right?
Short of that extreme, do you think Scientologists have a proclivity to avoid seeing the doctor, getting medication, getting assistance for?
I've thought about that a lot, and I've seen it. I won't name names, or unless you want, I can.
Not necessary.
Okay. Yeah. Someone very close to me. And how about we start with somebody even closer to me, like
Please,
me?
Go ahead. Okay.
I'm going to give you my example.
Yeah.
That caused me severe problems, and to some degree led to my breakdown, because I was in severe pain, but I would not get the prostate operation that I needed. And here's why. Get a really severe engram, I would be drugged, and I'd be in a hospital, which I was scared to death of. scared to death of. So I let the condition get to a point, and it was mainly an enlarged prostate. I don't mind talking about it. And it got to a point where I was getting a hernia just because it was so big, it was pushing my intestines out.
Wow.
And it turned out to be the biggest prostate my doctor had ever worked on.
Wow.
Or and we had a bet on it. And now we're talking about probably one of the most well-known urologists in LA. Fabulous doctor. Philip Weintraub is his name. Great doctor. If you have problems with that, man, he's the guy to go to. He's a brilliant surgeon, by the way. And anyway, I let that go on from 1994, when it first started to be an issue, or 93, might have even been 92, to 2012, because I was scared.
Wow. Okay.
He had told me I could have had the operation 10 years before.
Right.
I wouldn't do it.
Well, that's a perfect example of what we're talking about then.
Well, I'll give you two other short examples. One of them, the person really close to me, he was told to take his medications for heart, wouldn't do it, ended up with 2 heart attacks and 3 strokes. And he also had Parkinson's.
Wow.
He refused to take his medications. And I saw it. It was the same thing. He had this mindset that OT would do it. The OT levels would handle it.
Yeah.
And that medication, it was bad. It was really bad. And then I'll give you an example of how the mindset of Scientologists works, if that's okay.
Please.
Another person who's still in, she went in to get some kind of simple surgery, like sinus or something like that, but they had to put her under. She was pretty scared to death about it, but she did it because she had to do it. When she woke up, she had no memory. Completely, her memory was lost.
Oh, of everything?
Of everything.
Oh my God.
So this scared the shit out of everybody. Look what happened to me, because I just did a simple procedure, but I had to be put under, and I had to have, drugs or drugs to put me under. And the end result was, I don't know who I am.
Wow. Did she ever get any of that memory back?
She got it back, and then,
Okay.
she eventually got it back, but I just now realized the correlation between the fear and the suggestion. It's all about suggestion. And when you're hypnotized, which Scientologists are, then they're very suggestible.
Yep,
so
very much
she
so.
She took it to the nth degree, and of course she recovered eventually, but she went through that whole thing, and she created it based on her feeling about it. And she's now she's a diehard Scientologist. Diehard. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I used to really like her and her husband. Her husband's dead, and she's just out there being, a major, Scientologist.
Wow. And of course, all of this also goes back to Hubbard. I mean, just to go back onto the personality shift, that occurs in Scientology, because Hubbard was death on medicine and called them medicos and psychs, and they were all bad. They were all of the same, cut from the same cloth. And in real life, I mean, despite his propaganda, whatever his propaganda was, I mean, he had his own personal doctor, but he was loath to go for medical solutions, and especially dentists. He hated dentists.
Well, and you can see that in his teeth.
Yeah, that's why his teeth were so screwed up. I think his story about having died on the table in 1929 or 28 or whenever that was, I think that part of it was a true story. I think he did have a very bad experience with a dentist at some point. and the whole fantasy of, having gone off and gotten all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
answers to the universe is a bit much. But I think that he did have some kind of life-threatening thing, and I think that did turn him off of medicine.
Well, yeah. I mean, here's one thing. I can bring this back to being on the ship with him.
Yeah.
I think we can, tie this back to the ship. When I came off the ship, I had a very grounded view of him, but I still thought he was a brilliant and amazing. And the Scientology, I don't know how he figured out how to do Scientology, but he did. At the same time, the seeds of the conflict or the cognitive dissonance were there because I saw how much he was affected by his upbringing and what was important to him when he was brought up.
Right.
And so I see this, I can see that tied into the whole medical thing. He just cut himself off from all the research he could have continued to do regarding the breakthroughs that they've had in psychiatry and in the breakthroughs in medicine, in all areas that he refused to look at.
Exactly.
And basically, because of that, it's perpetrated to the present.
That's right. I agree completely on that. Totally. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get back to, maybe the timeline a little bit here.
Yeah.
What, we got, I mean, again, there's just, you're probably going to have books to write, on all the stuff you've experienced.
I am, as part of the program, which I'll interject, and I'm happy to do this because you bring out stuff that I didn't remember I even knew it, right? But I am going to write a book, or my brother and I are going to write a book about our experience musically, starting in the Bay Area where we grew up with people like the Dead and Jefferson Airplane, and move it up through Scientology and up to the present, because the 60s are a hot topic in terms of musically, for sure.
Yeah.
And so when you say this, it's a daunting task for me because of my age. It's like I'm 72 and I've started doing music when I was 16 and have, there's a story there. And I feel like, okay, I want to, if nothing else, I want to tell it because I want to push our band, and push our music. But people that have heard the story or parts of it say, you've got to tell that story because of what's happening right now and the interest in the 60s and the interest in Scientology.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all of a picture there.
Exactly. So
all right,
back to 70, leaving the ship.
Yeah, so you left the ship. So there are a couple points I really want to get to and touch on before we finish this thing today.
Okay.
I want to get to, the Dianetics jingle in the 80s. I want to get to the human rights stuff that you ended up working on.
Well, that's later. 2000. That's much later.
No, I know that's much later. I do want to talk about those things because I think that they're relevant and fascinating because nobody knows anything about that stuff. But you go back. What do you want to touch on here as far as after coming off the ship and stuff?
Okay, well, I will briefly touch on, I came off the ship. And by the way, part of the reason I wanted to go to the ship, I kind of wanted to go to the ship. And then I got that telex from Hubbard, Dan Arback, that got me there. So obviously my intention was there. It must have been to some degree because that visualization, I think, is valid. I mean, LRH calls it postulates, but there's a lot of other ways of talking about it. So I had left the ship. I was in love with one of the messengers. I mention that?
I think you had before you went to the ship.
Yeah. She was cute, got to tell you. And nothing ever came of it. And because my status on the ship kept getting lower and lower, as there was never a ghost of a chance that anything would ever happen with her. Came back. I was not interested. I was just interested in paying off my debt and working.
Yep.
And a friend of mine who was a masseuse, who was also good friends with Jimmy Sferris, and she was doing massages, she said, "Oh, I met an interesting gal. You might like to meet her." And she was trying to set me up. I mean,
Oh, got it. Okay.
she's Jewish. She's, you know, a matchmaker, and it turns out that this gal was a woman, very talented gal. She was pretty young, like 21. I think I was at the time like 30 or something, older than her, much older man than her, like something like 30 or something like that. I wish.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, I got introduced to her. At the time I was recording, I was pretty impressive. You know, we were, because the earlier albums had sold well. And so, and we hit it off. And her name was Diana Canova.
Okay.
She was just graduated from LA City College. So I met her friends who've all become, in their own rights, successful in music and theater, because she was in theater.
All right.
And so that became a big thing. And I won't get into it much other than I got her into Scientology. It initially helped her. And she was on a rocket ride. She could sing, she could dance some. She was a wonderful actress and comedian, not just actress, but a comedian. And she ended up, in the 2.5 years we were together, I was very supportive of her. So that was my time there. I was actually doing bluegrass at the time,
All
because
right.
I'd left Jimmy Sferris. That's a whole story by the Jimmy Sferris story is a tragedy. I don't know if we should touch on it, because I think it's important to touch on it, because it touches on an issue that was in the 70s horrible.
What happened?
And I believed, and to me, I actually, to some degree, was a perpetrator.
Okay.
So I was, you know, Jimmy Spears had a really tough upbringing, had some tough sibling problems with his sister. I'm not a big fan of. Anyway, Jimmy Spheris, you can look up his sister, who's a director. That's all I'll have to say. She's a pretty well-known director, by the way. Anyway, he had some issues. Super talented songwriter. I mean, in the same, like a combination of Dylan and Jim Croce, but he was a baritone. And we did amazing concerts. He turned from bisexual to gay. Now this is 74. By 76, he was pretty full-blown gay in a time period when you could be super promiscuous. And they were. They were.
Right.
I mean, guys that were gay, a lot of repression and suppression on the community. And the way they fought back was just go, fuck you. You know, we're going to do what we want. We're going to have a good time. Where that's, you know, you want to give, we'll be what you think we are. They weren't really all like that, but, and so he was good friends with Chick Corea, good friends with Stanley Clark. Chick had played on our third album. And so, and then all of a sudden, his promiscuity became, as far as the church was concerned, too much. And in essence, we abandoned him.
All right.
So I quit the band. I was doing other things, performing with another guy named Larry McNeely, who played with Glenn Campbell, and the Glenn Campbell, our brilliant banjo player. Talk about great bluegrass. So I was starting a new group of my own. I mean, it was Larry's group, but I was part of the group. More than just a band member, I was part of the group. And so, and Jimmy was manifesting those attributes of someone who's supposed to be gay or who's gay. It is supposed to have all these attributes. Jimmy was manipulative. He was narcissistic. Okay. But at the time, we all believed that he was being destructive.
Okay.
So Chick and Stanley, they were going to work with him, and they severed their connection to him. I severed my connection.
Did you think he was being destructive because of what L. Ron Hubbard says about homosexuality? Or did
Absolutely.
you think
No,
oh,
absolutely.
Okay. So this was 100% being influenced by the science of
Absolutely.
survival and that information.
Oh, yeah. And science of survival.
Sorry, that wasn't totally clear.
For people who don't know what science of survival is, it's the Bible of emotional levels. I mean, it's
right. According to L. Ron Hubbard.
And according to most of us that were indoctrinated.
Absolutely.
For me, it was that way.
Yeah, it's the second book Hubbard wrote in 1951. And it makes no bones. It does not beat around the bush in any way. Homosexuality and anything like that, any kind of perverted behavior.
Promiscuity. Yeah, it pegs you at that level.
Yep.
And then all the attributes of that level.
That's right.
So rather than supporting him or figuring out a way to just get him to be, get down to work a little bit more, because he had a great career. I mean, we had adoring fans, great concerts, and everyone I abandoned him.
Okay.
And Chick and Stanley did, and other people did. He was good friends with Diana Hubbard. He encouraged her to do her music album. He was the one, Jimmy Spheris was the one who actually, I think, even got her into the studio, got her onto a record label or something like that. So Jimmy, and unfortunately for Jimmy, he lost his support. And I don't think he ever recovered from it. And he died really young. He died in the 80s. Got hit by a drunk driver. He was on a scooter in like near Santa Monica in that area. He lived down near the beach, and he got hit. And he knew he was an interesting guy. That's all I can tell you. But he was like a poet, a crooner, wonderful lyricist, and beautiful songs. If anybody wants, you can hear his music on YouTube. And I think if he could have lasted to the 80s, he would have had a resurgence, because he was that kind of a new age guy.
Right.
But he was dead by then.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah, his cousin, Chris Spheris, became very popular in the 80s.
Okay.
But anyway, I diverge because I think it's significant that permeated and affected us in a really negative way, people who are creative. And so
especially in music and Hollywood. I mean, especially at that time. I mean, that was definitely a thing.
And the thing about Jimmy, he made no bones about it. He wasn't closeting himself,
right,
at all. He was who he was, and it pretty much brought him down. And I'm saying, but yet he believed in Hubbard. He believed in the tech and everything. He was a good auditor.
Wow.
He actually trained, and I could bet he was a great auditor, because the guy was intense. And when he was there for you, he was there for you. So
when you abandoned him professionally, that personally as well, I mean, did he keep doing Scientology himself, or did the church kind of?
He kind of stayed in.
Well,
no, Yvonne loved him.
Okay.
Yvonne, we did stuff. I don't know if I told this story. When Jimmy and we went out and we were doing a concert in Oklahoma where Jimmy was as big as the Beatles almost in Oklahoma. And I think it was our show. Yvonne came out with us. Yeah,
you talked about this in the first part.
Yeah, he did a lot of stuff for the church.
Yeah.
And he continued to stay in touch with Yvonne, but that was around when I split from him, it was around 76. And Yvonne only lasted another 2 years.
Okay.
So when he
Okay.
lost her, he lost his ally in Scientology.
Right. Okay.
And so from that point, it was downhill. He only was able to do one other album.
Okay.
And his style changed. Remember what happened? One of the most amazing types of music came into being in 78 that changed us all forever. But it was counter to Jimmy.
You're talking about disco?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm being very facetious.
Yeah. Well, it certainly launched John Travolta's career.
It totally did, and the Bee Gees were the best at it in terms of white people.
Yes.
For white people, they were really good at it.
Yeah.
But I like some of it. But the point is, he was completely out at that point. What's he going to do? He wrote beautiful lyrics and, melodious things that flowed. And if he, like I said, if he just waited and got into the 80s, there would have been a huge resurgence for him.
Okay.
So anyway, I went through, we are kind of following the timeline. I went through the 80s with bluegrass, and I did 3 albums that got released with Larry McNeely, who's wonderful. He's out now. He was in Scientology. He and his wife, Beth, are out, and I'm back in touch with them. I was out of touch with them because I was in Scientology and they weren't. They got declared. And it's so great to be back in touch with them because I should post some of the music we did. Larry was so far ahead of his time. And if you know of a banjo player named Bela Fleck.
I know that name, yeah.
He modernized and brought jazz and contemporary with the banjo. But Larry was slightly ahead of him. But we didn't know, at the time we were doing what we were doing. We didn't know that it was going to be later popularized, what we were doing. So anyway, he got messed up pretty bad by Scientology. And so we're almost, we're at about 78, which is when I was divorced. And my ex, Diana Canova, was now a superstar, TV superstar, because she was on a TV show called Soap. Soap was one of the biggest sitcoms in history.
Right.
And it had Billy Crystal, Bob Urich, Katherine Hellman. These are all actresses who were really big in that time period. And I couldn't keep up with it. And she was young, so it just all was too much for her to take all that in. And then I was kind of still a semi-struggling musician. She was making 10 times as much money as I was. So we split up.
Okay.
And I felt really bad about it. And she did too. But Scientology also permeated that in terms of making it worse. Because what I did at one point, I got up on my high horse, and because I didn't think she was in Scientology, it had helped her. I didn't think she was doing enough to disseminate, and now she's a big star. One day I just got on her case, and she was in tears. So I never got to apologize for that. I guess I'm apologizing right now. But I would, and eventually we broke up, and she went with a big TV star comedian, Steve Landesberg, who was big at that time. He was on Barney Miller, the TV show Barney Miller, which was another huge hit comedy. And then she eventually found her husband, Elliot Shiner, who is a major producer, worked with Steely Dan. I know if you look up his credits, they're like crazy. And so she's still with him. And she got out of, around 1980, she got out of, maybe about 81, 82, she was out.
Okay.
So it brings us up to the 80s. The settlement for us breaking up. I didn't want much from her. You know, it's like male pride or whatever. But what I did do is we sold our house. We had a house together, and she helped me buy another house that had a studio in it. So it was a full-on recording studio, and it turned into a 24-track studio, and now I had a business. So and at the same time, I was still doing Scientology and encores, and then working as a composer, and then I had a studio business, recording studio business.
Wow. Okay.
And that took me up to the Purif, 1980. I was on the first Purif. I had done the running program. Do people even know about the running program?
Yeah, I think I've mentioned it. You know, it was the precursor to the sitting in a sauna for 5 hours a day.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was wearing the silver suit, right? The rubber suit.
Yeah, you
and
wore
running.
a sweatsuit. But
Yeah.
when I say sweat, it was made of plastic, kind of. So you would sweat in it, and you had to run a certain amount every day.
Yeah, this is all based on Hubbard's bullshit theory that, you know, you can sweat out the toxins and do your skin as an organ will do a more efficient job of detoxing you than your liver as an organ will do.
Right.
So the liver's entire purpose is to detox your body.
Right.
And you know, it's pseudoscientific nonsense, but this
anyway,
you know.
I did the sweat program, and then I got converted over to the Purif, and I was on the first LA Purif.
Wow.
In the big blue building. And
so it was on the base.
It was on the base, and they couldn't afford to build a sauna. What they did, though, is they put it in the boiler room where the heater was.
Of course they did.
And so so it was really hot in there.
Yeah, it was
hot enough.
Fit in that room. Yeah.
And so mostly staff, a few public, but I wanted to be one of the first.
Okay.
So myself and the actor Bobby Lyons were good friends, and we twinned on it together. So we'd do the running part. At that time, you didn't exercise; you just jogged, and then you worked up a sweat, and then you got in the sauna.
And I think that's how it still is.
You still have to work up a sweat.
Yeah, you got to do like a half hour of running.
But they have running machines.
Yeah, they use running machines now, but it's the same purpose. Yeah.
Yes. But anyway, so that got me through that. And at the same time, I realized that all Scientologists are way more dangerous than non-Scientologists.
Explain how'd that happen?
I met somebody through my brother's wife at the time, and she purported to be a highly trained Scientologist, and she was very outgoing, and she caught me when I was breaking up with Diana. So I was in a pretty bad headspace.
Yeah.
And she saw an opportunity there. I had a recording studio. I was doing pretty well. And I had my band, the bluegrass band, and I was making money as a composer. And she befriended me with the idea that she was very, knowledgeable about Scientology. And she took on the role of personal manager.
Huh. Okay.
So I won't mention the person. I think she's out of Scientology now.
All right.
But I know her son is still heavy-duty Scientologist.
Okay.
And basically, she started manipulating me, and eventually, we sold a property. And I know she saw this coming. She knew I had another property that we're trying to sell, me and Diana. And I was going to get some money out of it. And I was ready to go to Flag. Because Knott's, that's the other thing, Ned for OTs came out in 78.
Yep, that's right.
Whoa, it was electrifying. I didn't know what it was, but the people who did made it really clear to me that I needed to do it.
Of course
And
they did.
they definitely
They were
did.
good Scientologists.
Yeah. And it was a secret, and there's no fucking way they'd get creamed if they let it out of the bag. I would have been in trouble. They would have been in big trouble.
That's right.
So anyway, now I had a motivation to get money. And so we started having groups of people helping other people get on Ned for OTs and stuff like that.
Okay.
Anyway, we did sell the property, and I was supposed to send some of it to Flag, but I needed to do my Purif. So this is 1980 now. This woman is working with me. She insinuated herself into Diana's life and basically third-partied or bad-mouthed Diana's manager and got herself hired as Diana's manager, because Diana still believed in Scientology, so she had hoodwinked Diana as well. This is kind of complex, but
Yeah, I get it.
now, but the manager, guess who the manager was? It was Harrison Ford's manager that she had jettisoned. So her career, I know. And so her career, Diana's career, took a hit because she just lost the top manager pretty much in Hollywood.
And this is 1980?
Yeah.
So this is Harrison Ford's manager. He has done Star Wars.
He's done
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
And American Graffiti.
American Graffiti. And they're now revving up to do Empire Strikes Back.
Well, it's 1980, and she drops her manager.
She drops this guy's man, and
picks up this
manager.
Inexperienced Scientologist.
You know, she must have had a brilliant sales pitch.
She did.
Yeah.
Oh, she had that kind of personality. She had that kind of personality. Underneath that, it's kind of, she could be as charismatic as we know Miscavige could be in person.
Yeah. Okay.
She was like a female version of him.
Wow.
So basically, that's how I learned that. Because here's what happened. I got the money from the house. I was on the Purif, and she said, why don't you lend me the money to go to Florida and do my knots?
Okay.
But how she did it is she started using the sex thing with me.
Okay.
And I bit for a week. That's all it took. Only have to bite once. And I made the agreement because I keep my agreements. The money went onto her account. And now I'm going, well, I can't really go because I don't, I lend it to her. She's got it. Of course, she's going to pay me back.
Oh, of course. Because that's what every Scientologist who borrows money always does.
Yeah,
they always get the money back.
They're very honest and ethical about that. I know that.
Yeah, we might possibly be being a little sarcastic right now.
Well, yeah.
Maybe. For those of you who are not familiar, do not ever lend money to a Scientologist. Ever. Because
and another thing,
you're never going to get it back.
Yeah, if you have kids that are Scientologists, make sure that in your will, you don't give them anything.
Basically, because it's all going to go to the church.
Well, once they get wind of it.
Yeah. And it's sad. It's very sad because, you want, I feel bad even endorsing a statement like that because, you want to put things onto your kids. You want your kids to have a good life and this sort of thing. And I know I'm not talking to a bunch of Scientologists right now. So, this is just for the broad public out there, but it really is like that. The church is voracious and they will never give up if they think there's an inheritance coming. I saw this countless times as a member.
I have another friend, and it's so bad that I won't even talk about it. It was so criminal that they left that family completely destitute.
Yeah.
And the woman who got the inheritance, she died very quickly after she gave the money to them, leaving the rest of the family with nothing.
Right.
I
And the
mean,
church
I
isn't
get,
going to give it back. There's no such thing as a refund to descendants or to family members. They just go, yeah,
no,
no, sorry. It's our money now.
yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
so it's nice. This had a good ending, kind of. I mean, good,
Oh,
bad
okay.
ending.
Okay, good.
I mean, it's really great. I mean, I think my life reflects physically what is in my head sometimes. So now this woman who's supposedly my manager, she's now in Florida getting ready to do what I was supposed to do
Yeah,
with my money.
right.
So now I was on the Purif. Let's go back to the Purif. I was on the Purif because I wasn't ready to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
One day I'm running on the Purif, and I got to say, something shifted.
Fair enough.
And everything, I realized because she was doing all this very subtle kind of put me down shit that you would say.
Yeah.
That's the way you do it. You know, you make the other person feel like they owe it to you or whatever. And it all hit at once. And I went, oh my God, she's been manipulating me this whole time. And the reason that happened because I had that epiphany a day later, the guy that I was performing with in a band came to me and said, I don't know how to tell you this, but I don't know if we can be together anymore because your manager, I won't have anything to do with her.
Okay.
So it all hit at once.
Yep.
So after he said that and after my epiphany, I call Flag and say, do not let her use that money.
Okay.
Now, this is a time when you could do shit like this. And actually, there were a few honest people that would listen to you.
Yep.
Anyway, this person was very crafty. She managed to circumvent it to tell the chaplain at the time some bullshit. And so they wouldn't give me the money back.
Okay.
You know, they're reticent to give money back anyway.
Well, of course.
So within a week of this was now becoming pretty stressful for me. Within a week of this, I'm just at the foot of the hill where I live on Ventura, and I'm really kind of messed up about this whole thing, and it's taking my focus away from a lot of things. I pull out on a blind spot and don't see this big old 1970 car coming, and I'm in a Honda. Hits me, broadsides me, and I go unconscious, end up on the other side of the street. So anyway, now I'm in a neck brace, vertebrae crushed. And my friends, who are my true friends at that time, and they knew about this thing with this woman, they basically said, you're going to Florida. We don't care what. You're going to Florida.
Okay.
You're going to sort this out, and you're going to get on your level, and you're going to fix this. So anyway, I end up there. Now she's there, and she's like, keep me away from this bitch. Sorry to use that word, but I can't use any other word.
Okay.
But I have to deal with it. So we have to come together with a chaplain and sort it out. And fortunately, he was a good chaplain. He's pretty famous I can't remember his name, but he's very famous, really well-liked guy. And from the 70s, early 70s. He was now a chaplain in Florida at the Florida base.
Yeah.
So all's well that ends well in a way. The money
Did you end up getting the money? Did you end up
was transferred to my account.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was transferred to my account, and here's the kicker was right after it was transferred, before I could use it, the prices dropped. So I ended up getting about twice as much as I could have gotten just a few weeks before. Now I'm in a neck brace, realizing
Right.
I saw the x-rays, and literally you could see where it's crushed. And the guy's saying, well, we don't know if you'll ever heal up, and blah, blah, blah. The doctor's saying that, right?
Wow.
Anyway, so I get some auditing on it. But at that level, they're now auditing at, they just threw me on OT4.
Oh, okay.
The new OT4.
Uh-huh.
Which was, so you're now auditing body thetans.
Right.
So I'm now getting a clue from that, and from what somebody said, inadvertently said about knots. I put 2 and 2 together, and I kind of knew what was going on.
Okay.
So I stayed there longer than I wanted to. And so I got onto Ned for OTs, and it was a revelation to me. I was really into it, and I have a different view of that, but that's for another time.
Yeah.
Of how I view it all now. All I can tell you is that it was effective.
Okay.
When I came back after 3 months or something, whatever it was, they kept my company going and everything while I was gone. When I came back, I was literally stronger. My neck brace is healed, and I was stronger than before I got in the accident.
Wow.
So it had done what it was supposed to do.
Okay.
For me.
You attributed that to the auditing.
I would say I attribute it to my ability to heal myself based on what I got.
Okay.
And how that works, I have a different view of it now. But it did work for me.
Fair enough. Not a point I'm going to argue. I just wanted to clarify where.
No, there's nothing to argue, because I view that we can either convince ourselves we can heal ourselves, or we don't. And if you can, there are lots of ways that can occur.
Absolutely. I have yet to do this, but I really want to get hold of a doctor who knows what they're talking about and do a podcast on the placebo effect, because I am absolutely fascinated by it. And I want to go into that.
I think it's
not
a combination.
The placebo effect is. I'm sorry. Let me just finish this thought. Is that it's not that the placebo effect is a fake cure.
Yeah, it's not.
Something actually happens there, and I want to fully grok that, and I don't grok that right now, but I think there's something to be understood about that.
Knowing as much as I know about knots, which is a lot. Yeah. Because I've spent a lot of time doing it. And then eventually saw a lot of the bulletins. You get to see all the bulletins on it.
Yeah.
I'm still formulating how that works and how it effectively helps you.
Okay.
It doesn't always. I'm saying there is some of it that potentially might be of effect that it had like that.
Fair enough.
And I think that has to do with convincing yourself that this is what's going to help you heal and is going to help you get into the area that needs healing.
Yep.
And I think it was effective in my case.
Cheers.
So,
well, the good news is that your neck healed, and it's
my neck healed. I came
before.
back. Okay, now and for the next 2 years, I didn't do hardly anything in Scientology.
Okay.
Partly because I was told that I was now a flag PC and I couldn't get auditing at the AO.
Right, that's right.
And the person who supposedly put all those stops on it was a guy named David Mayo, who was the top technical guy in the 80s, in the early 80s.
Right.
Oh, in the 70s.
Personal auditor of L. Ron Hubbard in the 70s, senior
yes.
CS International. I mean, this was a big wig in Scientology.
He put him in the film. Hubbard made a film and put David Mayo in it.
Yes, that's right.
That's how big he was. If Hubbard was willing to do that,
that's right.
That was big.
But by 1985, when I got involved,
Oh, he was out.
He was persona non grata.
Well, more,
Hubbard had, his name was poison. Hubbard never wanted to hear it again. And he had gone off and started his own Scientology group in Santa Barbara, where I started services.
I know, that's interesting.
Yeah, I never met him, but that was the story with David.
Well, I thought he was the devil incarnate.
We all did. We were told poisoned on his name.
No, he was truly the devil.
Okay. Okay.
At any point, but we didn't believe in the devil, but we used it as an analogy. So,
right.
Anyway, for 2 years, I had a great time. I remember it as my two most joyful years.
Okay.
And yet I had come back from Flag healed. I felt great. I now knew what knots was. I was on kind of a continuous positive kind of route without doing more. And from about 82 to or 81 to 83, I was in a country band. We performed 6 nights a week, had a ball. I was studying karate. I was doing things that normal people do and having a great time at it.
Excellent.
And then eventually, the big thing came down that knots was not being done correctly because of David Mayo.
Right.
That was the excuse, that he had suppressed certain things because he was a major suppressive person. Right. And so he had removed the parts of knots that had to do with suppressive people.
Okay.
I'm telling you, I know this because this all came down for me. And it was a revelation for me. And I went, oh, wow, maybe that's why things started to go wonky after a few years, 2 years or so. So all of a sudden, now we're talking 83, and eventually I was able to get back on it.
Okay.
So this whole time, me being in the country band, I wasn't performing much for Scientology. I wasn't doing much. But on the other end of it, they were starting to do effective marketing because videos were in, and you could effectively do things like make videos, and they could be used for marketing. Now, selling the books, going to book fairs or the book publisher fairs, and so I got in with CMU, Central Marketing Unit.
And that was a Sea Org outfit pretty much near the top of the church hierarchy.
Yes.
That was involved in disseminating Scientology to the world.
Through the books.
That was the purpose of it. Yeah.
Yeah, through the books. And so I was writing music for not only for Dianetics, I did some of their fiction work too.
Oh, wow.
I eventually started working with Jefferson Hawkins.
My friend Jeff.
See, at the time, I had a recording studio. It was a full-blown pro studio, so I could do pro music. I knew the technique of using source music, like production music albums that are libraries, so I could add music without big costs, and so I got in with those people. The Sea Org thing was kind of forgotten for this because they didn't really know. I didn't publicize it.
Mm-hmm.
But there were some people who came from the ship who were now at Gold. Gold was starting up. Golden Era musicians.
Yep.
That had moved from the ship to LA.
Okay.
So, but anyway, so we're going along, and so this was the 80s, early 80s, starting to do stuff for them. And then, so I was proud of that, of course.
Of course.
And I did get paid something. I actually got paid because I was outside. Not a lot, but I got paid. And things were going well. I liked the work I was doing. And So then I got back on lines more. So that was I was even cooler because now I was back on lines around late 83, 84. And the campaign starts. They start pushing for Dianetics to be stronger.
All right. And this is the campaign with the quotes and the
we weren't quite there yet.
They weren't quite there yet. Okay, it was not that. They were just
stuff,
starting to.
But I think, but now we're seeing David Miscavige is now a player. Ron Miscavige is a player. David's brother, Ron Jr.
Wow. Okay, Ron Jr. Okay.
And so these guys, David was not paying much attention to marketing, but he was following a path of we need to get it out to more people.
Okay.
Somebody was following that path. Hubbard was still around, but I think they wanted to make a big splash. What's the biggest way to make a big splash? Get Dianetics out.
Plus, they had to overcome the fact that by 82, 83, Hubbard's wife had just gone to jail, the whole Guardian's Office fiasco, the conversion to the Office of Special Affairs. I mean, there was a whole image reformation that had to happen with Scientology.
It really did. And so it was starting to happen with the central marketing people.
Right.
Quietly, they were doing a good job.
Right.
And I know all the people that were involved. Another friend of mine was a media buyer, great media buyer. I mean, she's a pro, total pro. So anyway, we're doing those things. I'm seeing things change. David Mayo is kicked out. So I'm going, oh, maybe that's the reason that shit was not happening right. And then I see that David Miscavige or something, there's little rumors about change of who's involved. And I saw it as a good sign that Scientology is starting to become mainstream in their marketing and promote. Okay. And so the campaign was evolved. It started to evolve. Oh, by the way, I had to move. It's a funny anecdote. I had to leave my home studio in Studio City, which is up in the hills, beautiful studio, because it was a commercial studio I was running in a residential area.
Oh, of course.
So in all this other stuff, 1983, I get a notice from the city. They were pretty nice about it. I'm surprised that they were as understanding, that they didn't kill me. They had gotten complaints from neighbors finally, because what happened is my booking person had booked a gospel choir into this house. So can you imagine the neighbors seeing a bus or all these black people coming in to the studio? But that's not the real issue. Supposedly, right after that, there was a rash of burglaries.
Oh.
So the neighbors equated as, we can't have this going on any longer. So I got reported by somebody.
Okay, I get it.
So I have to move to Burbank. So I moved to Burbank, find a commercial building, build it from scratch. And then I populate it with another talented musician, Stephen Bach, who has been partnered with me as a composer because he's a wonderful pianist and a good writer. We moved into there, and then I built the studios. He kind of went off on he was becoming disaffected. So I eventually terminated my connection to him.
Okay.
And we had a pretty successful, there were other issues, but we had a pretty successful little run there in terms of doing stuff. And
now this was just to not, I haven't been keeping hash marks or anything, but
right.
What is this, 5, 6 major people that you've now disconnected from or gotten out of your life for some reason?
Gee, I mean, like the first one was
I mean, I'm not talking about an exact count, but it's just, I'm noting the trail of.
Well, you can see you can see it more external than me, but I can say the first one was when we first got into Scientology and kicked Larry Norman out of the group.
Yeah, that's
right.
With
no real provocation, really good provocation, he was removed because he was a little bit eccentric. A little bit. I mean, he was pretty eccentric.
Yeah.
Very talented, and we thought that we couldn't work with him anymore because he wouldn't get into Scientology.
Right.
So then
So
there's him.
I just want to point out that it's not always because a Scientologist gets hauled in to see an ethics officer, and the ethics officer says, "Okay, now I, as the representative of the church, am telling you that you better get that person out of your life, or else." No, this happens all the time in Scientology because this is what cults do. And I just wanted to point that out, you know?
Yeah, well, it's a mindset.
Right.
I know, yeah, I'm in talking with somebody very close to me who disconnected from me recently. I was fascinated by the conversation and how they took it personally that I had attacked the church.
Right.
They took it personally.
That's right.
Like I had attacked them. Because it's a hive mindset. And if you think of a hive mindset, you attack anyone else in the hive, and immediately it goes out, and the whole hive comes at you. You've attacked every single one of them.
That's right. It's a great way of putting it.
So anyway, so we're getting up to the Dianetics Commercial. So anyway, Stephen's gone, but yeah, that's true. And so then I'm looking for a new partner. And this is around 83. I moved. Chris and Nancy Maney had left the Sea Org.
Okay.
I think that they actually left. They routed out, and they saw things that didn't make sense to them. I don't know their story exactly, but I think Nancy has told it really clearly in her book.
Yes.
And
I think her book is called $1 Million Contract.
Or a billion-year contract.
Yeah. Billion-year contract, yeah. And she tells the whole story, and she does a brilliant job of it.
Yeah.
She worked with Hubbard. She was in the highest levels of the Sea Org. She
was one of the aides.
Yes.
So she was the president of Celebrity Center at one time. And Chris was the staff captain. I met Chris in 1989 at Celebrity Center when he was literally a very young man. And we hit it right off because he was a wonderful piano player. We even started writing together a little bit just to do it. But he joined staff and I left staff. In 70, I left in 1970. I was on staff at Celebrity Center for 6 months, and then I was gone. I wanted to do music. Anyway, now cut to 1983. Somebody who was advising me knew, she used to be ex-staff, and she knew Chris had left. And she says, you know Chris Maney, right? And I said, yeah, I really like him. Well, he's no longer on staff. Said, why don't you try him as a partner? So he knew nothing about recording. He knew nothing about synthesizers. He had not done music since 1969, other than maybe play a little bit at the org on piano. So I got in touch with him, and I didn't have any bias about Sea Org, obviously.
Right.
And so I said, and he was in good standing. He had paid off his freeloader really quick, but Nancy had not done hers quite, and he was working on it for Nancy.
Okay.
And so we did an album together. I was doing production music, which is music for film and TV and commercials and corporate. It's like they're called needle drops then, or library music or production music. I just landed my first record with one of the big companies in LA. And I liked the way Chris wrote, and we hit it. And so we wrote several pieces on the album, really successful. So I integrated him he was working at a computer company. I integrated him into the group, and he had part-time computer and part-time working for me. By 85, he was almost a full partner. 85 is when I think the commercial started getting developed.
Okay.
The iconic Dianetics commercial.
Okay.
He was on board.
And how did they approach you with it? And what was your
Well,
role?
see, I wasn't viewed as an ex-Sea Org member.
I got that. Yeah.
No, very few people knew I was even in the Sea Org. They knew me as Jimmy Spheris' guitarist, as, you know, I had worked with Jeffrey Lewis on stuff that later became Celestial Navigations. I worked with Dick Glass, who was at one time a recruiter in the Sea Org for a short period of time, a really talented singer-songwriter. So that's who people knew me as, and people. So Chris was he was kind of my partner behind the scenes. Nobody really knew he was even working for me. So it was fine. I was a point man, working with Jeff Hawkins, working with Rick Rogers, working with Mitch Brisker. These are the guys who helped develop this campaign.
Okay.
They're all guys from commercial backgrounds.
Yep.
They're actually pros. And that's who they went to. Jeff Hawkins was not stupid. He used real pro people and trusted them. So I'm not sure which one of them they came up with the questions idea because they thought that Source could actually intrigue people. When I say Source, actual ideas or quotes or questions related to what Hubbard said in the Dianetics book.
Right.
Now, nobody had done this commercially prior to this. I mean, commercially, no one had run commercials with just black and text questions.
Right.
And the program or the campaign was called the Questions.
Okay.
And so it was a pilot project. It didn't cost much. They had to do the effect of a volcano at the end, graphics effect. That was it. Black with, and the great thing is they started running it. My friend did the buys. She did very, strategic media buys on local TV or on network TV.
Let me just back up 1 second, just because I want to ask about this. Were there any special instructions, or was it merely your own inspiration, or how did you come up with the jingle itself?
Oh, you mean the music?
Yeah, because you guys are the ones who did the music for that commercial. That's.
Well, I remember the exact moment that I came up with the most iconic part of it.
Yeah.
I remember that. But let me give. Do you want me to answer it right now?
I do, because then we'll get back to the media buys.
Okay.
I want to know about the production of the commercial. I mean, listen, it is literally one of the single most effective commercials I've ever heard of. I will tell you that nationwide.
Nationwide
thing with Dianetics. I mean, it got name recognition.
I think it also became in Europe that it became pretty effective too.
Yeah, it was a big deal. This is not a small thing.
Dianeticists,
Scientologists went out and bought lots of copies of the books, and maybe it wasn't really as big a bestseller as the New York Times made it out to be at the time. But it is undeniable that Dianetics got name recognition from something like 2% to like 80 or 90%.
Let me dispel that point of view.
Okay.
That Scientologists went out and bought it.
Okay.
Remember, this was Miscavige, had no programs. There was none of that underhanded bullshit.
Yeah. The
sales were 99.9% new people.
Fair enough.
Because they had no motive, they had no machine to do that. People already had Dianetics. They might tell their friends about it because the commercial was well received.
Yes.
But they didn't. So anyway, I saw that firsthand because I was being given the information on the media buys and what kind of result they were getting. It was
Okay,
it was way beyond any little minuscule getting Scientologists to buy the book. They do that now, but then they didn't even think about it. They wanted results.
all right.
And they didn't want any influence. You got to realize Jeff Hawkins was pretty much unbridled in what he could do. Miscavige was busy trying to take over other things.
Right.
He was not paying attention to Jeff Hawkins or us. They weren't
Okay.
paying attention to us at all. They
Good.
really weren't.
I'm actually happy to hear all of that. That's because it does make this, puts it into the perspective it should be in, and that's what I wanted to hear here.
So anyway, to answer your question, back to
yes, the jingle.
I have to give you my view of working for Scientology at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that way up until really probably 2008.
Okay.
And this is my view. I wasn't good at being an FSM. I wasn't a good disseminator. I didn't know why. Now I understand why I wasn't a good disseminator.
Okay.
Because I didn't believe it myself, but I couldn't admit that to myself. Therefore, and I didn't feel I was a good enough example because I had issues. I had problems, physical problems. I had shit that I had. But I was dedicated to the nth degree, and I could take my talent. If I could take my talent and help spread Scientology, then I was, okay, I'm doing my part. I'm doing it. And there's a lot of pride there.
Sure.
So if I took on a project for Scientology, it would be the equivalent of James Horner working on the Titanic and writing that song he wrote for James Cameron and for that movie. It's like I was inspired. So the music that came out of me, whatever it was, as good as I was technically, or not as, however good I was, I made up for it in my feeling that I was putting into the music.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense.
So when I did the Dianetics commercial at the time, we didn't think anything about it. It's just, wow, I have the opportunity to help do a commercial campaign that's actually going to go on the air. So I'm like, wow. So one day I'm sitting in my new studio in Burbank in one of the rooms where there's one of the newer synthesizers made by Yamaha. It's called a DX7. In the early 80s, you hear all kinds of sounds. It swept the musical scene.
Okay.
This was developed, the technology was developed at Stanford. The Japanese took the technology, made a Yamaha instrument out of it. And it's what everybody had to have that instrument. Everyone. So I had it. So I'm in the room with the instrument, it's plugged in, and I don't know what possessed me, but we knew it was questions. We didn't know what, we knew it was going to be, they just described it. It's going to be black. It's kind of, we're trying to create a mystery here. Mystery sandwich. We're trying to create these questions. How are they going to get answered? By the book.
Right.
And that's BY the book or BUY the book.
Right.
Both of them.
Yeah. Play on words there. Yeah.
Yeah. So we hadn't even seen it yet, I don't think, or we had been told the way it was going to be, but I wasn't looking at the video. And I just sat down and I went, which is, let's see. Oh, I don't have anything up.
That's fine.
I do have a piano here. Can you hear that?
Yeah, that was it.
Anyway, so I said to Chris, because Chris was my partner at the time, well, how are we going to build this? And he was technically better. He was the keyboard player.
Okay.
But I brought it to him. he said, well, what if we had these samples of big orchestra hits, right? This is when sampling, I'm getting into musical stuff, but I can't help it. It's, it was one of the new technologies that they were putting computers inside of these boxes for musicians, and they could actually record a little bit of digital music, and then you could lay it out on the keyboard.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, now everything is that way. You can hear an orchestra, and it almost sounds, you almost believe it's a real orchestra.
Right. But at the time, this was brand spanking new, cutting edge.
Brand spanking new. Oh, just like the DX was new, so was this. It's called sampling.
Yeah.
Sampling, digital sampling. So we had some of the sounds, and at the time, that was a fresh sound. This orchestra hit, boom, at the very end of and so Chris and I put it together, and we gave it to him, and Geoff was the decision maker, really. I mean, Geoff and Mitch Briscoe, I think, and Rick Rogers, they were all producing. And they said, yep, that works. That was it. Just, yep, that works. Cool.
There you go.
Okay, then there was like, let's try it. So my friend did the media buys, and the rest is history. She was a really good buyer, so she would look at an area, and then they would see what happened in the bookstores in that area. And that's how they did it.
Here's the last question I have for you on this.
Yeah.
Obviously, this was huge. It was very successful. They were selling Dianetics books like, hotcakes. Hand over fist. Yeah, it really was. I even remember this campaign, and I was 15 years old at the time. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it still sticks in my memory. Yeah. Was there any acknowledgement, accolades, laurels you were given by the church as a result? I thought you might say something like this, because my mind, I think that our brains communicate with each other telegraphically. Okay, that's where we open the next, if there's going to be another interview, that's a hot topic. Okay. I'm telling you, it's way hot. I think I can get some of the documents that came out at that time that were issued. All I can tell you, that was a pivotal point for me in Scientology, and I don't want to say anything more about it. Oh my God, everybody's going to hate us for this, but this is a perfect place to stop. But I've got to say that there's so many lessons to be learned from what happened. Good. To both Chris and I. Good. Well, we are definitely going to do another part then, and yeah, this is a great way to end off, I think, because I took huge pride in being a part of that. Mm-hmm. Huge pride, because and I'll say one thing about that campaign. It was so successful that other agencies copied it and started using the same device of written text and then an answer. That's right. That's how successful it was. And I'll tell you, that copying, is the highest form of flattery or whatever. In the marketing world, that is absolutely true. If you are onto something hot, then you are going to see other people doing it. If it's not hot, nobody's going to bother. No, and I'm telling you, even to the music, they started. Yeah. But they were, and I got to tell you, I mean, we were pretty high on it. Oh yeah, I want to leave it. Just let's not make any mistake about it. For in the trajectory of Dianetics and Scientology, if you step 3 feet back and you look at the entire time track of it, this was a pivotal time, and this commercial, this marketing of this book at this time was absolutely crucial to the future survival of Dianetics and Scientology. I would argue that there were other factors involved. Absolutely, there were other factors. There was the factor of celebrity. There was the factor of the change in leadership. There was the factor of tax exemption. But this thing that happened in the 80s with this marketing campaign put and kept Dianetics on the map for years and bumped its name recognition like you wouldn't believe. And arguably, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. And Dianetics and Scientology might not even still be around right now had it not been for what happened at this time period.
No, you're absolutely correct. And I was aware of all these things going on, the celebrities, because I was at Celebrity Center. But what I saw, because I had been in marketing since 1975 myself.
Yep.
And prior to, in 1984, I wrote the music, not the commercial music, but the music that rolled out the Macintosh. I was working for Apple.
Wow.
I was there when the Apple was revealed to all of the software developers, including I met Bill Gates, who was a little software developer then. He developed Word. I met him. We were, and like an idiot, I took his card and forgot about it. He gave me his card. He said, "Here, hey, you're doing the music for it? Cool. Well, here's my card." Anyway,
those moments in time, right?
Oh yeah. Well, anyway, so I'd already done that. It was, the rest is history.
Literally.
And I worked for Apple from about 1979 through the 80s. I think through the 80s.
Wow.
So doing
there's, and it's anyway. Okay,
but,
good. We're going to wrap up.
My point is that I saw that happening and I was jaded. My view was, Scientology needs to get out there, but boy, its marketing sucks. And that's why I was there, because I was a professional and I wanted it to be better. So when this started to happen, I was kind of just holding my breath and going, well, we'll see. When it really hit, it was like, okay, this is for real. This is totally for real. Yep. And I felt great about it. The only thing I can say is now I'm dealing with my karma of how many people I probably indirectly got into Scientology. And it's a karmic thing for me. It's like, shit, okay, you gotta make your statement to try to rectify it the way you can. I mean, that's my view now.
Understood.
Or I wouldn't be talking, you're right, I wouldn't be talking to you if that didn't, it's so interesting how one thing in history and maybe a small group of people can change history for some movement, for some product, and in this case,
that's right. People out there who think you don't matter, people out there who think what they do doesn't matter. Man, I'm telling you, you got no idea.
No, that's so not true.
That's right.
Is so not true. But what I was going to say is, I really give kudos to Jeff Hawkins. And one thing I have to say, he did what he did and was able to do that because they were not paying attention to him.
Right. That's right.
I know that for a fact.
Yep.
The next chapter or the next interview or whatever we do, I will get into what happened.
And I think people are not going to be able to wait very long. So I think we're going to probably be doing that pretty soon.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to talk about it.
Absolutely.
Let's put it this way. I can be pretty objective about it now.
Okay, good.
That's all I have to say.
All right, man. Well, we will definitely hook back up sooner than later. Everybody out there, thank you very much for sticking along with us here and watching this whole thing. I have definitely been enjoying this, Geoff. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. And folks, leave your questions, comments, feedback in the comments section here on YouTube or at my blog, mncriticalthinking.com, where this will be posted. I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.